The front door burst open with a sharp crack. Could a father's past save his son from this chaos? Splinters of wood flying down the narrow hallway. Shouts pierced the air. On the ground now. Hands on your head. Old Clarence dropped to his knees, hands raised as he watched his son Nick being slammed against the living room wall, blood trickling down his face from the brutal impact with the edge of a bookshelf. On the floor, surrounded by shattered glass and a broken family photo, an old dog barked, confused by the chaos. Outside, neighbors were recording everything on their phones. And there, on his knees, Clarence whispered just one thing. Call General Sampson. Willow Creek, California, was nestled between oak-covered hills and winding roads layered with golden leaves. That's where Clarence Harlow lived. 65 years old, widower, carpenter, a man with a deep gaze, a quiet voice, a steady walk, and calloused hands. He was always seen wearing a faded brown cap. To the neighbors, he was simply known as Clarence from the workshop. Clarence's house was simple, but sturdy, made of light wood with wide windows and a small front porch that held 2 rocking chairs creaking at the slightest touch of the wind. The paint was chipped in places, but the porch smelled of fresh varnish and sawdust. An American flag, slightly faded, fluttered from the post fixed to the doorframe. Parked on the side of the house was a navy blue 1999 Ford F-150, resting with a kind of rusted dignity. Every morning at 7:30 sharp, the rhythmic sound of sawing and hammering echoed down the street. The workshop was out back. There, Clarence crafted everything from church pews to custom-made cribs. He was meticulous, silent, patient. Anyone who saw him there, canvas apron on, safety glasses in place, would never guess that this man had any history beyond the art of wood. Nick, his 22-year-old son, had been living with him ever since dropping out of community college. A quiet young man with gentle features, still struggling to figure himself out, he worked part-time at a small grocery store, delivered orders by bike, and spent afternoons helping his father sand down pieces or organize custom orders. Despite the silence between them, there was respect. Nick watched him the way someone studies a puzzle they haven't figured out how to solve. In the living room, above the cold fireplace, sat a wooden figurine, an eagle with its wings spread, and a single black and white photo. A boy in a scout uniform smiling beside a tall young man with a serious expression and eyes hidden beneath a military cap. Life in Willow Creek was predictable. On Sundays, Clarence brought apple pie to Mrs. Flanagan, a widow with arthritis in her hands. He was seen as a model citizen. Never argued, never raised his voice. His old dog, Gus, followed him everywhere, except into the workshop, where wood shavings weren't kind to his tired paws. That week, the town was especially quiet. The corn festival was approaching, and Clarence had been hired to build the new stage for the ceremony. He had worked late over the past few days, measuring and cutting beams, the warm orange light of his workshop glowing past 10 o'clock. Nick helped him carry boards, sweating and laughing whenever his father let a dry joke slip between the work. The night before the incident, Clarence made chamomile tea, just as he had done ever since his wife passed. He sat on the porch, Gus at his feet, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. There was peace in that moment. But there was also something hanging in the air like the breeze before a storm no one sees coming. That morning, when the clock read 6:15, Clarence woke to the muffled sound of tires screeching outside his house. He got up slowly and turned on the living room light. Gus growled low. Clarence said nothing. He walked to the door and looked through the small window. Red and blue lights spun silently. A black unmarked van was parked by the curb. Before he could say a word, he heard the crash. The crash of the door bursting open echoed through the house like a bomb. Clarence didn't even have time to react. Gus the dog barked fiercely before darting under the kitchen table. Nick, still groggy, appeared in the hallway, confused. The ground now. Hands on your head, one of the men in black shouted, already aiming his weapon directly at Nick. Clarence raised his hands. His breathing remained calm, but his eyes took in everything with sharp focus. For hooded men, all in black tactical gear, shoulder radios active. A woman, seemingly the leader, came in last, holding a tablet. She didn't even glance at Clarence. She simply pointed at Nick. That's him. Search everything. Living room, bedroom, grab his computer. Before anyone could say a word, one of the men grabbed Nick by the neck and threw him against the wall. The impact was brutal. The sound of the bookshelf breaking filled the silence. Blood slowly dripped from the young man's eyebrow as he slumped to the floor, dazed. He's 22. He works at a grocery store. Clarence shouted, taking a step forward, but immediately felt the cold barrel of a gun pressed against his chest. One more step, Grandpa, and you're going down with him. This is a mistake. This isn't, shut up. The woman cut him off sharply. This is a federal operation. Clarence looked around. He saw his home being torn apart. The front door destroyed. Wood and glass scattered on the floor where Gus was slipping, trying to get to Nick. Yes, this was his house. But something was terribly wrong. The team began tearing through drawers, trashing the kitchen. One of the agents kicked open the cabinet in the back workshop. Nick tried to sit up, swaying. Dad, what's happening? Stay down, son. Clarence replied, still standing without raising his voice. Neighbors began to appear at their windows. Some stepped outside in robes, phones in hand, recording everything from a distance. Clarence looked at Nick. Blood stained his t-shirt. The old man's eyes didn't blink, but his breathing began to shift. Subtly. He didn't move. The team searched every corner. They found absolutely nothing suspicious. No weapons, no cash, no drugs. The commander furrowed her brow, clearly unsettled. Then one of the agents, the youngest of the group, who had been going through the back workshop, hurried back in. He approached the commander and whispered something in her ear, holding an object in both hands like it was too delicate to drop. She took the item and glanced at it quickly. It was a Silver Star Medal, one of the highest military honors in the United States, awarded for gallantry in combat. The medal was inside a small blue velvet case with the name C.H. Harlow discreetly engraved inside the lid. The commander turned the box toward Clarence, her weapon still drawn. Her voice, once firm and authoritative, now carried a faint tremble. This medal, is it yours? Clarence slowly lifted his eyes. His son's blood still stained the carpet. Clarence kept his breath steady and answered with just one sentence. Call General Sampson and tell him to pick up personally. The silence that followed was thick. The woman hesitated, but in the face of that medal and the unshakable tone in Clarence's voice, she stepped back and spoke into her radio. Command, this is Lieutenant Amanda Foster. I need to establish contact with General Sampson. Can you confirm the name? The response took a moment. 1 moment. The team, once aggressive and focused, now stood in confused silence. The agents exchanged looks. Some had already started lowering their weapons. Lieutenant Foster's radio crackled. Secure line. General Sampson on the call. She swallowed hard, turned her back to the agents, pressed the button on her shoulder radio, and spoke. General, this is Lieutenant Amanda Foster, SWAT Division. We initiated an operation at a residence located on Maple Lane in Willow Creek. We entered under a federal warrant to arrest a suspect tied to the Lopez cartel. We found this insignia in a hidden cabinet and were instructed to contact you immediately. A deep commanding voice answered with a Southern California accent. Did you say Willow Creek? There was silence for several seconds. Then came the reply. Lieutenant Foster. There's only one person in that town who has that insignia. The deal house you entered belongs to Clarence Harlow, naval intelligence veteran, decorated with 3 silver stars, author of the Bravo Protocol. I want the names of every agent on site right now. Will this father's hidden past protect his son from further harm? Foster turned pale. Sir, there was a coordination error. The warrant said, you raided the home of a living national asset. Where is Harlow right now? She turned. Clarence was still kneeling, his eyes locked on hers. Nick groaned faintly on the floor. Gus lay next to the young man like a loyal soldier guarding a wounded comrade. He's unharmed. You have no idea how lucky you are. The call ended. Lieutenant Foster approached Clarence slowly, still holding the insignia. She tried to stay composed, but her voice faltered. "Sir, the warrant listed this address as belonging to one of the Lopez cartel's local operatives. Our target was someone named Nick, described as the right-hand man of the local boss." Clarence took a deep breath. "Nick is my son. He works part-time at a grocery store. He's never even left the state. You came in here like you were hunting an animal." She lowered her gaze. The damage was done. Command confirmed it was the right address. The profile matched. Young white male between 20 and 25. She bit her lower lip. "I didn't know who you were." "But you should know who any citizen is before pointing a rifle at their head," he replied. Foster had no response. Her agents were frozen in place like figures caught in a war painting. Clarence walked over to Nick, knelt beside him, and examined him carefully. Then he stood up, looked directly at the commander, and said only, "They're coming." For the first time that morning, Lieutenant Foster didn't know whether to stand her ground or run. In less than 30 minutes, a UH-72 Lakota helicopter touched down on the abandoned baseball field behind Willow Creek School, just a short walk from Clarence's house. The rotor blades sent leaves and dust swirling in every direction. The town had been on edge since dawn, and news vans were already starting to arrive. General Sampson was the first to step out. Black suit, dark sunglasses, a golden insignia pinned to the left side of his blazer. Behind him, a small team of agents, all former combat veterans. As they made their way toward Clarence's house, 2 county officers moved to intercept them. "Excuse me, gentlemen. This is an active SWAT operation site. We have protocol." "Colonel Ryder," Sampson interrupted, reading the man's badge. "Yes, sir. From this moment on, all authority over this property and any individuals within it falls under my command." The officer paled and stepped aside without another word. On the porch, Lieutenant Amanda Foster sat on the lower step, her radio off, her hands covering her face. Her posture spoke of exhaustion, confusion, shame. As Sampson approached, she stood up. "General," she began, raising her voice. "No, just listen." Sampson climbed one step and stood eye to eye with her. "You entered the wrong house, assaulted the son of a national hero. Humiliated a man who saved lives you wouldn't even know how to name. The real Nick you were after has been in custody since last night," Sampson continued, staring her down. "He was arrested in Stockton, 200 m from here in a joint task force operation your command center clearly overlooked. The physical description may have matched barely, but a simple background check would have cleared this up. The real Nick never lived here. And that kid." He pointed to the wounded young man on the couch. "That kid never did a damn thing wrong." She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "Sir, you're suspended. Effective immediately, you will be escorted to base for an emergency disciplinary hearing. Stand by for further instructions." One of Sampson's agents stepped forward and requested her radio. She hesitated, then handed it over. Another agent silently escorted her down the block. Clarence opened the door just as Sampson stepped onto the porch. They exchanged a look, brief, silent. A recognition between soldiers. "Took you long enough," Clarence said with a weary smile. Inside the house, Nick now lay on the couch with a damp towel on his forehead. A paramedic was tending to him. Outside, the street was filling with cameras, neighbors, and murmurs. Sampson turned to Clarence. "You want the press to know?" Clarence took a deep breath. "No, I just want my son to heal. And I want this street to go back to the way it was. That's all." Clarence nodded toward the street with a subtle tilt of his chin, where phones were still recording, where neighbors whispered, and where once fearful eyes now seemed full of respect. In the days that followed the incident, Maple Lane was no longer just a quiet street in a small town. The story of Clarence Harlow, the humble carpenter who was in fact a living legend of military intelligence, spread through newspapers and social media like wildfire. "Decorated veteran son mistaken for criminal," read the headline in the town's main newspaper. Meanwhile, the town itself began a quiet transformation. The local police department started training in empathetic engagement. A new identification protocol was implemented. One afternoon, a reporter who had been waiting outside Clarence's home finally got a chance to ask a question. "We heard you requested that Commander Foster not be punished. Is that true?" Clarence held the microphone for a moment. He looked toward the workshop where Nick was sanding a piece of wood. Then he replied, "Because she learned, and those who learn deserve a second chance." On Friday of that same week, near sunset, the old doorbell at Clarence's house rang. He was in the workshop, sanding the edges of a small children's stool. Gus barked once, then went quiet. Clarence wiped his hands on the rag hanging from his apron and walked to the door. It was her, Lieutenant Amanda Foster. Out of uniform, hair pulled back, a simple dress. In her car, a small wooden crib, slightly damaged. "I was wondering if you might be able to fix this. My sister's expecting a baby soon." Clarence looked at the crib for a moment, then at her. He gave a small nod. "Come in." Just before stepping inside, Amanda paused. "I should have looked more carefully. And I'm sorry about Nick." As if he'd heard his name, Nick appeared in the side doorway of the workshop. He wiped his hands and walked toward the front entrance. She looked at him, visibly moved. "I'm sorry, Nick." "Really, it's okay. It'll be a good crib." Amanda let out a soft laugh. The tension eased. Clarence carried the crib over to the workbench. He ran his fingers across the worn joints and pointed to a specific kind of screw. "These are mass-produced. They loosen over time. I'll replace them with dowel joints. They last longer and they don't squeak." She watched him like someone witnessing a ritual. Every movement he made was precise. As the first traces of night settled over Willow Creek, Clarence's workshop once again filled with the gentle sounds of wood being shaped. The scent of fresh varnish lingered in the air. Nick organized the tools. Amanda stood quietly observing. And there, with no uniform, no medal, Clarence Harlow returned to doing what he now did best. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, because tomorrow I have another story especially for you. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where quiet strength is celebrated, and every hero story finds a voice.